Okay, so you know what we're going to do to keep Naftali happy. We're going to start off the share talking about an avera. That's what we're going to do. So one of the biggest averas we have.
You should let me don't I'm the expert.
One of the this I'm not sure. One of the biggest averas we have is avodah zarah. Yeah. Okay, Avodah zarah, fine. So that's an affair we can talk about. It's not so okay. Now, when it comes to avodah zarah, so obviously you're not allowed to serve avodah zarah, you're not allowed to sacrifice to avodah zarah, things like this. And there's other halachas and other mitzvahs that are sort of revolving around that. Just like you're not allowed to serve avodah zarah, you're actually also forbidden from having benefit from an avodah zarah too, right? So you can't have hana from an avodah zarah. You can't have hana, pleasure from a sacrifice that's over to avodah zarah. These things are awesome. Okay. Now the Gemara tells us, it's a Mishnah in avodah zarah. The Mishnah says that that's all deraisa. I mean, you're not allowed to serve avodah zarah from the Torah. You're not allowed to have benefit from avodah zarah from the Torah. Chazal say, the Mishnah says in Maseches avodah zarah though, that Chazal instituted midrabanan that avodah zarah is also tameh. Right? So back in the times, you have a Beis Hamikdash, you want to make sure you want to be able to eat, if you're a Kohen, you want to eat Truma, you want to visit the Beis Hamikdash, you have to make sure that you're Tahar. So you don't want to become Tameh. So Chazal instituted that an Avodah Zarah will make you Tameh, so you have to stay away. Now the Mishnah of Avodah Zarah gives us a pasuk as the source. Again, it's only rabbinic, but we know there's a principle. Whenever Chazal make halachas, they usually try to find a hint or something, an asmachta it's called. There's a pasuk that it should rely on. And the pasuk is regarding the prohibition of serving avodah zarah. It says, Shaketz tishaktzenu. Shaketz tishaktzenu means that you should, you should be disgusted by it. And so the Mishnah says that word of like sheketz, that it should be like something gross, that's usually associated with tumah. So although the pasuk doesn't mean on a biblical level that avodah zarah is tameh, but at least midrabanan, that's enough of a hint. Okay, that's the Mishnah. What is interesting like this is that the Rambam in the halachas of Tumah, he records this halacha that avodah zarah makes you tameh, and he brings down a source, a pasuk, which again is only rabbinic, but an asmachta, which by the way on its own is interesting. The Rambam, generally speaking, does not do that, even though Chazal will bring psukim to sort of show as like a hint to a rabbinic decree. The Rambam usually doesn't do that. If it's D'Rabbanan, he just says it's D'Rabbanan, finish. He won't find psukim to hint to it. In this case, he does. And what's more so is that the pasuk that he brings is not the pasuk that the Mishnah uses. It's a completely new pasuk that he found on his own from our parsha, from this week's parsha. This week's parsha, after Yaakov Avinu and the whole, Shimon and Levi wipe out the city of Shechem, right, after the whole thing with Dinah. So, and they take all the things that they want to take, and now Yaakov and his family are traveling on. So it says, V'yomer Yaakov l'beiso, v'kol asher imo, Yaakov says to his family, to everyone that was with him, Heisiru es Elohei hanechar asher b'sochechem, remove all the idols that you accumulated in the war with Shechem, v'hitaru, and purify yourselves, v'echlifu sim l'seichem, and change your clothing, Heisiru es Elohei hanechar, so remove all the idols and purify yourself. The Rambam says that's the pasuk where we see this idea that Chazal sort of, connected to, that you see this idea that removing idols is in order for tahara. It says remove your idols and become purified. So that's the pasuk the Rambam brings. So here's the question. The question is, again, first of all, why is the Rambam even bringing a pasuk? That's not usually what he does. Usually he just tells you the halacha and finished. You want to know the sources? Look in the Gemara. The Rambam is just telling you the halacha. Over here, he goes out of his way to bring you a pasuk. And if he is bringing a pasuk, it's not the pasuk the Mishnah uses of Shaketz tishaktzenu. He uses this other pasuk in Parshas Vayishlach, talking to Yaakov, telling his children, remove idols and become purified. So what's going on over here? All right, so it's like this. This idea is not just a halachic issue with the Rambam, whatever it is. This is a mahalach. The Rambam is telling us a mahalach about how to deal with everything that's wrong in life. The Yetzer Hara itself. You have to understand, avodah zarah is obviously, technically, just one avera or one particular thing to stay away from. But in a much broader sense, avodah zarah is the root of everything that's wrong in life. Everything that's evil in the world comes from avodah zarah, right? When the Nachash tried to convince Adam and Chava, the Nachash, that was the original sin was avodah zarah, right? Eat from this tree and you'll be like God. So everything is rooted in avodah zarah. So if we could use this halacha to investigate what our relationship should be towards avodah zarah, that'll be a window into how to deal with our own yetzaras in general. So it's like this. This concept that Chazal enacted, that an avodah zarah is tameh, there's two ways to think of it. One simple way is that Chazal made idols tameh. So certain animals are tameh. A person has tsaras is tameh. A dead body is tameh. And an idol is tameh. Just midrabanan. That's one way to think of it. And that would be the impression that you would get based on the pasuk that the Mishnah in Avodah Zarah quotes. Shaketz deshaktzenu. That's a language that's used to describe an object that's repulsive, that's tameh. So avoid it because the object is tameh. But the other way to think of it is not like that. It's true that tsaras is tameh, and a dead body is tameh, and the sheretz is tameh. But when Chazal said avodah zarah, they didn't mean that the object of avodah zarah is tameh. What they were saying is, the object is fine. What they were telling is, you as a person, I want you to stay away from these things if you want to come in contact with something that's holy. It's a din, in like the way, it's a din on the gavra, it's on the person. It's not about the object is actually not tameh. In other words, you have a scenario. The guy wants to go to the Beis Hamikdash, yeah? He wants to visit the Beis Hamikdash. The problem is, he can't become tameh. So, if this object is tameh, so automatically he has to stay away from this object if he wants to go to the Beis Hamikdash. So, that's one way to think of avodah zarah. This object is tameh. You want to make a trip to Yerushalayim, don't touch that. Because if you touch it, you're not going to be able to go. But the other way of thinking is, no. What Chazal are really trying to get at is, they don't want you to touch this thing. So what they'd say is, not that it's tameh. They're telling you, treat it as if it was tameh. Meaning, that just as if it would be tameh, you wouldn't touch it if you want to go to the Beis Hamikdash. So we're telling you, don't touch it if you want to go to the Beis Hamikdash. Not because it's tameh. Treat it as if it's tameh. This is what the Rambam is hinting to by quoting this particular pasuk. He's avoiding the pasuk of the Mishnah, because the pasuk of the Mishnah will give you the impression that the Rabbanan decree is that it is tameh. And that's not the pshat, says the Rambam. The pshat is that the Chazal are not making it tameh. They're telling you it's a mitzvah on you to stay away from this object. Not because it's tameh, but you have to act as if it's tameh. Namely, don't touch it, stay away from it. Not because if you touch it, you'll actually become tameh. But the point is to stay away. And that's the pasuk the Rambam is quoting. Hisiru elei anechem mikir b'chem. Yaakov Avinu is telling us, just get it out of here. He's not saying because he's just get it out of here. That's the point of this takana. Chazal are not trying to say it's actually tameh. It's a din on the gavra, on the person, that Chazal made this mitzvah on a human being to avoid avodah zaras. Now this idea of why Chazal would make a funny halach over here, like just in other words, instead of doing the most direct route, which is Chazal can just make the thing tameh, and then automatically you're going to stay away from it. Chazal is sort of avoiding that, and they're making this whole funny situation, which is it's actually not tameh, but we're telling you on a mitzvah on you, treat it as if it would be tameh. Like, why not be direct? Why not just make it tameh? The answer is as follows. We find the basic principle with avodah zarah, which is that from the Torah we have many mitzvahs like this, halachas like this, that our relationship with avodah zarah is such not to give it chashivas. Don't give it chashivas. There's a mitzvah in the Torah of shem Elohim acherem lo yisaskiru. There's a prohibition not even to mention the name of an idol. Not even to mention the name of an idol. The Mishnah, the Gemara says examples of this, that if you're meeting someone and it's you need to give the location, to where you should meet, and you want to meet in front of some temple, like a Buddhist temple or something. So the halach is, you're not supposed to say, meet me in front of the Buddhist temple. You give some other demarcation point, or the name of the street, whatever. Because you're not even supposed to mention, the guys are worshiping idols. When you mention that demarcation point, you're just saying where we're going to meet. Shem Elohim Achim, don't mention the name of other gods. That's why, with Klal Yisrael, even we don't Isa Ish, right? Yashka, we don't mention his name. The minhag of Klal Yisrael in Europe was that if you lived in cities that the name of the city was based on an avodah zarah, the Yidden would change the language, right? Peterburg, they don't call it St. Petersburg, even though it's not you're just saying the words. You don't even want to say that. Like my family, part of my family comes from a city in Russia that in Russian, the name of it is, it translated to English, is White Cross. That was the name of the town. But all the Yidden there, they called it Schwarz Timme. That's how they used to call it. Black Tumma. That's how the Yidden called it. Just the opposite of what the name was. White Cross, Schwarz Timme. That's how it was called. And this is all because we don't even mention the name of Avodah Zaros. Why? What's the idea? The idea is don't be marshiv it, don't give it chashivas, don't acknowledge it, don't give it power. Adrabah. The whole idea of Avodah Zarah is that you're giving that this object, you're mistakenly thinking it has power, right? In other words, God is all powerful, and instead of leaving that power to God, you're now attributing that power to a tree. The whole inyan of Avodah Zarah is that you're giving this tree too much power. So what do we do in response to that? Give it more power. Or the opposite, you take away its power. So says the Rambam like this, when Chazal are making something tameh, even if it's tameh, Chazal would never, says the Rambam, actually make the object tameh. You know why? Because that's giving it power. It's saying that if I touch it, it affects me, it puts tum on me. That's giving it power. Chazal would never want to do that. Our whole relationship with Avodah Zarah is what? Is taking away its power. Don't give it existence. Don't be machshav it. Don't even talk about it. Don't reference it. Don't even acknowledge its existence. And so Chazal are not only going to acknowledge it, they're going to give it a power to impure other things. That's power. Therefore, says the Rambam, that's not what Chazal are doing. That can't be what they're doing. They would never do such a thing of saying, it has tumah, and be careful, don't touch it, because it might, when you touch it, it touches you, and then you're tumah. They would never give it such chashivas. What they would do is the opposite. They'd say, treat it as if it's tameh, which basically means avoid it. Not because it has power, it is nothing. But you avoid it. And by you avoiding it, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. That's a derivative, that's part of our whole approach to Avodah Zarah, which is stop thinking about it, avoid it, don't acknowledge it, don't give it any shlit at all, don't give it even negative power. Don't say it's tameh even. Like that's also acknowledging it and giving it power. The whole inyan is that the whole problem of Avodah Zarah is that it's a tree is something, but you gave it so much somethingness. You gave it too much somethingness. So our response to it, the tikkun for Avodah Zarah, is not to give it more something, it's to take away, don't acknowledge it b'chlal. This is why even in halacha, there's such an idea that if you own something, I'll give an example. The halacha is that the only object, it's a fascinating halacha, the only object that could actually become an Avodah Zarah, technically, I mean, listen, anyone can bow down to anything, but for it to become halachically an Avodah Zarah, that you cannot benefit from it and whatever, is only if the object was affected by human beings. In other words, if people worship Mount Everest will not become an Avodah Zarah. Why? Because it's not man-made. And it wasn't even manipulated by human beings. It's completely from God. The only object that can actually become an Avodah Zarah is if it's man-made, or at least it was manipulated by a human being. Something had to happen to it. Yeah, you take a stone and you cut it off of Mount Everest, and you bow down to the stone. That's Avodah Zarah, because at least human beings got their hands on it. Halachically, it's called tfisas yad adam, that a human being manipulated it. Well, why is that? Why is that the halacha? The answer is because the whole idea of Avodah Zarah is yeshus, that it became something, that it has an unholy sense of self. God is the only something. And now all of a sudden you're going to say that this tree is also something. There's only one creature on planet Earth, in the universe, that has a strong sense of something, a sense of self. And that's the human being. As the human being is. We have free will and all that. Avodah Zarah is basically, if you take your ego and you implant it in objects, that Avodah Zarah is basically ego run amok. And there's only one creature that has jurisdiction over ego, and that's the human being. So an object that has connection to people, that can theoretically become an Avodah Zarah. If it has nothing to do with people, was never touched by a human being, then automatically it doesn't have an ego like that. The whole definition of Avodah Zarah is ego, something. We're giving it too much power, giving it somethingness, and that's why Avodah Zarah can only come when it's coming from a person, because people we see ourselves as something. That's what Avodah Zarah is. Avodah Zarah is the definition of Avodah Zarah is yesh, that it's a something to the extreme, to replace the something that's God. And so what's our response to Avodah Zarah? Not to give it more somethingness. Our response to Avodah Zarah is to take away its somethingness, to be mavatal it. Don't mention it, don't talk about it. So this is a discussion about Avodah Zarah, but it's much broader than that. I mentioned from the beginning that the Avodah Zarah is the root of all problems. All Yetzaharas, all Averas stem from that sentence that the Nacha Shet Adam and Chava, eat from the tree and you will be like God. So therefore, if all Yetzaharas ultimately find their root in Avodah Zarah, and what's our halachically, what's our halachic response to Avodah Zarah? How do we relate to that? We relate to Avodah Zarah as, don't pay attention to it. Stop being machshav it. Stop giving it more power by thinking about it. Don't even mention its name. This is therefore telling us a general hashkafa, a general worldview in terms of how to deal with the Yetzaharas. First and foremost, you know how to deal with the Yetzirah? Stop thinking about it. Stop giving it power. The more you think about it, the more you're giving it power. You, as a person, are a nuclear power plant of somethingness, right? You're a human being. You have an ego. You have a sense of self, right? You have a sense of self. Anything you think about, this is a little bit of a trippy idea, but anything you think about, you are injecting somethingness into that thing. It's not just a random thing. Whatever you think about, you are giving power to. Like in reality, because you are a source of power. God is the ultimate something, and you are creating His image. So everything in the world is really nothing. It's nothing. It's either something. It's a tree. It's a rock. It's a stone. Whatever it is. It's an animal. There's no ego there. Animals aren't polygaiva. When the lion is running after the zebra, if in the middle somehow you could psychoanalyze the lion's not thinking ani hagever. He's not thinking like, oh, I'm all that. That's what a lion does. It runs after a zebra. And the zebra doesn't have this inferiority complex of like, look at me, this is what it does. I'm being chased. There's no ego there. Animals don't have ego. There's only one creature that has ego, and that's the human being. You know why you have an ego? Because you're created in God's image, and God is the real something. God is something. But the problem is that when we take our mind, which is so something, whatever you think about, you are giving that thing somethingness. So Avodah Zarah is that to an extreme, that you're literally injecting a tree with the greatest something of all, that it is God. That's terrible. But on a certain level, anything you think about is you're giving that thing power. And that's the root of all Yetzaharas of the world, is because of ego. It's all because of ego, right? It could be Avodah Zarah, that's obviously, you name it. It's all because you're not just a lion and a zebra doing what your Creator wanted you to do, right? Anytime you deviate from what the Creator wants of you, it's because of your own ego. So how do you respond? So therefore, in other words, every Yetzirah you have is really Avodah Zarah. It's really just an object of Avodah Zarah that you are empowering. That is sort of like hijacking your ego, your sense of self. So how do you respond to Avodah Zarah? How do you respond to all Yetzaharas? Stop thinking about it. The more you think about it, the more you empower it. This is the problem that very often people have when dealing with like Yetzaharas and trying to overcome these things, is that they think about it too much. Like, just move on. Moving on doesn't mean ignoring the problem. It's actually fixing the problem. Because when you move on and you disengage your mind, which is something, from that object, then guess what? That object turns back to nothing. Because it always from the beginning was nothing. Why was it a something? Because you gave it power. So stop giving it power. That's what Avodah Zarah is. This halacha of when Yaakov Avinu says to his children, just remove it. Just get rid of the idols from the house. And says the Rambam, and that's the source of this halacha of tumah. In other words, what the Rambam is saying is, and there's no actual tumah there. And Chazal wouldn't want to do that because that's giving it power. Rather, what's our response to Avodah Zarah? Just get rid of it. Get it out of sight, out of mind. And then you just move on. Listen, there are certain things that a person has to sort of like deal with in order to move on, but the objective always has to be to move on. The objective, even of tshuva, is not to fix the past. There's a big mistake people make. Our objective is not to fix the past. The objective is to have a healthy future. Sometimes maybe more than sometimes, in order to have a healthy future, you have to correct something of the past. But it's not about the past, it's about the future. And whatever extent you need to deal with in the past in order to navigate the future, then that's what you do. And the rest you forget about. And it's not forgetting because you can't handle it. That's called bittul chametz. You know what I'm saying? That's called disengaging the mind. Chazal even say this, bittul chametz, that's mamish what it's about, right? Chazal describe the Yetzer Hara as arsha v'isa, the chametz of the heart, right? Chametz is always compared to the Yetzer Hara. What do we do before Pesach? So you try to destroy all the chametz that you can, but what you can't get your hands on, what do? Bittul chametz. What does bittul mean? I'm not thinking about it anymore. To me, it doesn't exist. And then it doesn't exist. Because the whole issue of the Yetzer Hara was by you empowering it. Everest cannot become an avodah zarah. Things can become corrupted only because it has human fingerprints on it. Because you are the only creature that has a sense of something, and you inject somethingness into the things that you think about. The Mahalach HaDvarim is disengage, become bigger than your Yetzer Haras, and then from that place of confidence and strength, then you deal with whatever the inyanim that you're dealing with in order to help navigate the future. That's the objective. It's like the famous Maisa, I think it's from Meir Primulshlaner, I think they say it by a few people. It's not too much of a maifis. It's a little bit of a maifis, not too much. The Maisa goes that there was a certain mikveh that he used to go to. It was at the bottom of a steep hill. And so it's one thing, he was an older person at the time, but it's one thing to go there during the summer, so it's not, but during the winter it was like icy and slippery, and every day he would still go to his mamash fine. So the mice is that there was, a bunch of couple people that maybe had a difficult time with the Munas Tzaddik and Mus Chachamim, and they said, well, if the old man can do it, then certainly we can do it, and they tried to go down the hill, and they broke their legs, they fell. So they asked him, the Rebbe, how could you do so? How is it possible that we're young, we're able to do it and you couldn't? So what does he say famously? If you're tied up above, then you don't slip below. If you're thinking about every single step going forward, then guess what? You're going to fall. Because you're empowering the eyes. You're giving power to it. Like the Baal Shem Tov famously said, it's another famous, again, these are classic mashals by the Baal Shem. He said there was one time that he took his chassidim on a class trip to the circus, right? And he saw a tightrope walker. And he's mamish like Baal Shem Tov watching this guy. He was mamish like in Dveikus with a gartli. He was mamish, and then after the whole moment is over, so he goes over to the tightrope walker and he says, "How do you do it? How do you not fall?" So he said, "You don't look down. You keep your eyes focused on where you want to go." And he said 2 points: keep your eyes focused on where you want to go, and if you feel yourself tilting to one side, then you compensate by tilting to the other. And he said, those are the two keys. Said the tightrope walker, how do you get to the other side? Said the Baal Shem Tov, that's what Yiddishkeit's about. Don't look down. You look in where you want to get to, and you on the way there, you compensate. Sometimes you tilt this way, so you tilt the other way. And then you keep your eyes focused on where you want to go. Don't empower the Yetzer Hara. In the Zohar Kadosh, evil is called, there's a name for it, which is Tohaima Rabbah, the abyss. The abyss. You don't look into the abyss. You look into the abyss, you're going to fall. Don't empower it. Don't empower it. Just move on weiter, and by doing so, by disengaging mentally, then you're actually being mavatal chametz. You're actually weakening its hold over you. Hashem shall, we should be zeichet to get out of all these tumas and time rabba and just keep running the prize and get where we need to get. Be a skol tzedek me'er v'meinu amen.